Okay. Baruch Hashem, this week's portion is Tazria Metzorah. And Tazria Metzorah, there's a lot to talk about. Now, normally we would start with Tazria and then go to Metzorah, but I was nervous that if we start with Tazria, we might never get to Metzorah because there's so much to talk about in Tazria. So I want to start with Metzorah, and maybe on Wednesday we'll talk about Tazria. But Tazria Metzorah, I know that some of you are going to say, where is the relevance here? We're talking about here about a disease. Primarily, most of the portion is talking about a condition where a person gets struck with a illness that causes him to have or her to be exiled from the community, sent out of the community. It's a skin condition, but it's not only a skin condition. The reason why we know it's not only a skin condition is because it also appears on clothing and on homes. And we're told that this person has to leave the community. He has to leave the community and go through a spiritual process of going to the Kohen and also being separated from the community for 7 days before re-entering into the community. And the re-entry ceremony, which is the beginning of chapter 14, verse 1, is a ceremony which seems at first glance to also be so esoteric, so completely divorced from the reality of our lives today that it's almost like, what is the point of even studying this? And our eyes might roll back. But to the back of our head, as we say, this is a good time for a snooze. Chas v'shalom, God forbid, just the opposite. This is the opposite of a snoozer. This is the time to a very, very powerful portion, because what the portion is really talking about, when you break it down, is that when a person goes through some sort of condition which causes him or her to be isolated from the community, how do they re-enter the community? How do they re-enter into society? Now, the exact details, the specifics, might not be completely relevant currently because we don't have this condition. It's called leprosy in English, but it's obviously not leprosy. So the exact specifics are no longer applicable because we no longer have tzarat, but the overarching theme that a person needs to go through a process of rehabilitation in order to re-enter into society, and B, a person should look inward, not that other people should look at him and say that he has to improve himself, but that a person always needs to be looking inward to see how we can improve ourselves spiritually in order to find, again, our place within society. But also when a person has gone through a period of isolation or for whatever reason been forced to leave a community, a person shouldn't just try to re-enter the community. A person first needs to look within ourselves and try to figure out how we can improve ourselves, and in some way understand that the separation from the community is an opportunity to improve ourselves in order to come closer to Hashem, and when we come back into the community, to do it the right way. So, I mean, there's a very careful line we have to thread here, because the last thing we ever want to do, the absolute last thing we ever want to do, hold on, let me just stop if I don't shut off my messages, they come pouring in. Now, the absolute last thing we want to do is to blame a person who's sick and say that in some reason your own spiritual defects is what caused your illness. That's not our place. That's not our tradition. It's not our belief. But at the same time, we do want to encourage everybody to have a lifelong process of looking within ourselves and always trying to improve. And especially when we've had setbacks in life, that it's an opportunity to try to improve ourselves spiritually. So the most famous reason that why people think Tzarat is this condition that causes a person, a whiteness on one's skin that causes a person to have to be isolated from the community. So what's the reason why Tzarat comes? The most famous reason that's often cited is the fact that the person was engaged in Lashon Hara, in bad speech. Rashi says that in our portion. Rashi says, by the way, it doesn't only mean gossip. It doesn't only mean gossip. It could mean just malicious speech, that you're not using your words in a proper way. Rashi says that this is the reason why, is the purification process, that the Kohen is supposed to take two birds. What's the reason why he takes two birds? Rashi writes, because the afflictions come al lashon hara. Lafisha nagaim ba'in al lashon hara. They come because of the malicious talk, shehu ma'aseh pitputei devarim, which is an act of verbal twittering. This is a word, this translation of Rashi was written well before social media existed. And Rashi says that it comes for verbal twittering. So, therefore, therefore, there was required for his purification birds, that they have to take these two birds, shemefatfin tamid. They constantly twitter, b'tzivtziv kol, with the chirping of a sound. Okay, so that's what Rashi says, but really Rashi is only citing one of the 7 reasons that are listed in, there are 7 reasons actually that are listed in the Gemara in Erechim 15b. And the Baal HaTurim refers to this. The Baal HaTurim states on the verse in Parashat Tazria, in chapter 13, verse 44, it says, in that verse, verse 36, it says, the Kohen shall investigate. This is also a proof that it's not like a medical condition, because if you have a medical condition, you go to a doctor. You don't go to a Kohen. A Kohen is a spiritual doctor. So the fact that the Kohen is investigating, it's a proof that this person has a spiritual element. So the Kohen looks at him, v'ina fasa netek ba'or, and indeed the mark, the mark that makes him impure has spread on the skin. Lo yivaker hakohen with seyara tzahov tamehu. The Kohen should not examine it to see if it has gold hair, because it's already tameh. And the Baal HaTurim says here that the Baal HaTurim quotes here that Tzarat comes for 7 reasons. He's quoting the Gemara in Erechim. Actually, there's more than 7 possible reasons, because there's another midrash which lists 11 reasons which it comes, and then there's a third list which lists, and it's in Vayikra Rabbah, which lists 10 more causes. So altogether, let me list some of them, so you'll see that it's not just Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara was made most famous by the commentary of Rashi. But let me give you the other explanations. The Erechim 16a in the middle of the page lists Lashon Hara. Number 2, another reason why it comes is if you shvichut damim, if you murdered somebody. Number 3, if you took a false oath. Number 4, basically illicit intimacy like adultery. Number 5, arrogance. Number 6, robbery. Number 7, stinginess. And then there's another list, which is in the Tanhuma, which says that it comes for 11 reasons: idolatry, chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name. Number 3 is adultery. Number 4 is robbery. 5 is lashon hara. 6 is false witness. 7, a judge who distorts the law. 8 is false oaths. Number 9 is somebody who or removes the boundary of a friend, meaning to say you trespass on your friend's boundary. Number 10, one who comes up with plans to perpetuate falsehood. And number 11, somebody who causes familial strife. I'm sure nobody here has any familial strife, but it's somebody who causes familial strife. And some add stinginess. Then there's a third list, which includes, in addition to the ones we mentioned, they also mentioned cursing the name of Hashem, robbery of communal property, robbery of private property, haughtiness of spirit, and stinginess. Anyway, by the time we're done with all of these lists, you can see that it's almost every. I mean, there's nobody who has not done one of these sins. I'm sorry. I don't want to cast aspersions against any of the holy people who are joining us for Torah study today, but it's hard to imagine that anybody is such a tzaddik you haven't committed one of these sins. So by making the list so large, what the rabbis are in effect saying is that if you got sarat, we don't know exactly what sin you've done, but you need to do a complete reboot. You need to do a complete reboot of yourself to try to improve spiritually, because there's something that it's an indication of a mistake that you've made. Let me just pause for a second to take some question here. Okay, so it says in our portion, Zos tia Torah Metzorah. This is the Torah of the Metzorah. So this is the Torah of the Metzorah. Let me just pause for a moment. What do you mean that this is the Torah of the Metzorah? This is the laws of the Metzorah. So the word Metzorah is connected to Motzi Ra, the one who says something bad about somebody. It can mean somebody who speaks bad. So that's what Reish Lakish says. Amar Reish Lakish is the Gemara in Erech 15b. What do we mean when it says Zot Tieh Torah Metzorah? This is the law of the Metzorah. Zot Tieh Torato Shamotzi Ra. This will be the law of the one who produces bad things, and this is how he becomes purified. I do want to say before let me read this first. Let me read first the commentary of the Kometz Mincha, and then I want to talk about what the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, because it's important to bear in mind what the Lubavitcher Rebbe says also in this context, because he has a very, very important message. The Kometz Mincha says that the Midrashim are filled with warnings about the serious consequences of Lashon Hara. And aside from the fact that this is a sin that's equated with idol worship, why is it equated with idol worship? Because it comes from the same root source as idol worship. The idol worship comes from a place of arrogance, and so does this one. But on top of that, somebody who engages in evil gossip is rendering his mouth unclean, so that if you gossip and then you go into prayer and study, and you study right after you gossip, basically the everything that comes out of your mouth is now defiled by the gossip that you just said. How much worse it is, there are some people who in synagogue while they pray are gossiping. Did you ever hear of such a thing? People, while they're praying to God, are gossiping. That is so upsetting, so deeply upsetting, that if somebody will be in a synagogue, in a shul, gossiping. So when it says, when David HaMelech said, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking guile, depart from evil and do good, he means to say that doing good has value only if one guards one's lips from evil gossip. Because without this precaution, the good a man does, if you don't guard your lips from doing evil gossip, then all the good that you've done cannot be credited to you because it's barred from its purpose. It's because you're filling your mouth with corruption, because it's filled with gossip, and then everything that you come out of your mouth is also defiled. So this is the idea of Zostia Torah Metzorah, Biyom Taharato. It says in the verse in chapter 14, verse 2, this is the law of the Metzorah on the day that he is purified. Meaning to say, when is the Torah of the Metzorah relevant? When is the Metzorah's words Torah? Only on the day that he's purified. Only once he's purified is there value to his Torah study. If the rabbis are gossiping and then they go and give their Talmud Shir is defiled, it's corrupt, it's not going to be a valuable Torah. It's a defiled Torah. And that's the teaching of the Komotz HaMincha, a very powerful teaching. Unfortunately, it's the case that many times I've been around rabbis who actually do violate this law. They do speak Lashon Hara, and that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy, because it's bad when anybody makes a mistake and sins spiritually, but when a rabbi does, the rabbi is supposed to be setting an example of how to act. So it's a defilement of all the Torah that he's teaching. So I wanted to just, I wanted to stop for a second and say what the Rebbe says, because I want to make sure that we get this point in, and then I'll come back to the Chafetz Chaim. But I wanted to say what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said about this. The Lubavitcher Rebbe points out something else. Lest we pile on this person. This person who's the Metzorah has done something very bad. That's why he's sinned spiritually. That's why he's exiled from the community, and he has to go through this process. What does he do? He's out of the community for a week. He's hit rock bottom. He has to shave all the hair from his head, which is all the hair from his entire body. Normally, and this is actually today's daf, a person is not allowed to shave even one drop of hair from their body. But the Metzorah has to be completely humiliated as part of his purification process. He has to shave all the hair from his body, even though we learned in today's daf that he's not allowed to round his hair. He's not allowed to cut off the corners of his beard, but as part of the purification process, the Metzorah has to cut off everything. And yet, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is, as he so beautifully and brilliantly points out, that why is the portion called the Metzorah? Why are we naming a portion after a person who's this sinner? And why are we spending an entire portion dedicated to the cure of this individual? Meaning to say, okay, he's done something terribly. He's paid the price for his sins. He's been isolated from the community. Why do we have actually two portions? Tazria Metzorah related to this person. Why is that the case? Let me pause. Anybody have an answer for that? Anybody have an answer? Okay, I see everybody is okay. I see Bruce or April. Yeah, hold on, let me pause. The Rebbe takes the approach that the reason why we devote these portions to the Metzorah is because it's through this person that the Messiah will come. This person, the Rebbe says it a little differently, but this is how I read what the Rebbe is saying. This person who was isolated from society, who was hit in a certain sense, rock bottom, in the sense of feeling excluded, feeling spiritually bereft, forced to wallow in their rejection by society. This is the person who will eventually bring the Messiah, because this is the person who improves himself spiritually, who's who's gone through this process of becoming a better person. So most of us who never got thrown out of society haven't gone through a real process of self-reflection and introspection. Maybe we'll have moments where we'll self-reflect, moments of introspection, but not an extended period of self-reflection and introspection. This is what the Rebbe writes. He writes, Parshas Tazria is named after sowing, meaning to say Tazria means to sow. That this is the act of embarking on a process leading to a new life and growth. Even though the most of the portion is on the life-negating disease of tzaras, because tzaras is not intended, this is what the Rebbe writes, tzaras is not intended as a punishment, but as a new beginning, an impetus to reaffirm life. I want to say, before I go on with this, I saw, yes, so Bruce, or April wrote this in, yes, the Messiah is amongst the defiled beggars at the gates of Rome, but is not alone. And the Rebbe writes this here. The Rebbe refers to that. Excellent. But before we get to that, I want to just bring in an example I saw today. Here he says that Tzara is not intended as a punishment, but as a new beginning, an impetus to reaffirm life. I saw today, I don't know if anybody else saw this, is there a company called Neuralink based in Arizona. And they had the third ever successful human trial today, but it was the first ever with a person with ALS. Did anybody see this? Nobody saw this? Well, the person has ALS and he was nonverbal, and they put something in his brain, inserted something in his brain that he, using AI, he now controls from his brain a computer cursor, and he can speak, and in his voice using AI, and he's able to speak. And he made a 10-minute video talking about how just this incredible achievement, scientific, is really miraculous to see. It's going to be called Neuralink through ALS. His name was Brad. Anyway, he talks about how this person who is Christian, and he attributed to his faith, talks about through his illness, all the blessings he had found in his life through this just incredibly challenging disease. He's not saying he wishes he had this disease, but he's saying he's so grateful to all the things that he found as a result of this disease, about all the close time he spends with his family now, but he also feels like he was given this place on earth in order to be able to be a messenger for the importance of this disease, of how to treat this disease, because I guess not everybody has the right makeup to be able to be a human experimenter or a medical experimenter. But anyway, this is what this sentence reminds me of, that he did not view his disease as a punishment, but as a new beginning and an impetus to reaffirm life. Here he was with this ALS in this very advanced stage, but he was feeling refreshed in the ability to communicate, and just like one of the first people in the world, the third person, but the first with ALS, to have this ability to communicate in such a sophisticated manner. And so that's what Rebbe here is writing about the Metzorah. He says the Metzorah is named after the person afflicted with this disease because the purification process is nothing more than a continuation of the condition itself. It's the next step in the rehabilitative process, meaning to say we shouldn't be focusing, the purpose of this portion is not to focus on the setbacks of this person, but the rehabilitation, meaning to say that what is the Messiah called? We call the Messiah himself is called the sprouting of the Mashiach, the Smichas Keren. Behold, the days are coming, says God, when I will raise up a righteous sprout from David. A king will reign and prosper, and he will administer justice in the land. So, and the Talmud says that the Mashiach's phrase is the Metzorah of the house of Rabbi Yehuda the prince. meaning that's what the Mashiach is known as, the Metzorah. He is known, the Mashiach is known as the Metzorah. He is known as this person who was initially thrown out from society, rejected from society because of his sins. The people that society looks either at best looks past and at worst looks down upon. That is the person who will be able to lead us out, because this is the person who has suffered, struggled, but then has seen the light and through self-reflection has improved himself. And he cites the verse from Isaiah 53, it was our illness that he bore and our pains that he carried, meaning the whole time he was carrying our illness, but we regarded him as a Metzorah, smitten by God and afflicted. So basically, Metzorah is, says the Rebbe, Metzorah is, Tazria means the work we do to cause redemption, to sow, and Metzorah refers to the Mashiach himself. This is what the Rebbe says, that this person who we viewed as the sinner who was thrown out of society, that is the Mashiach himself. Basically, this person who has, and in that context, we go back to this phrase, Zostia Torah Metzorah in chapter 14 at the beginning. This is the process of how the Metzorah will go through this process of rehabilitating himself to become pure. But really, it's not just about him. This whole portion is how we go through this process of becoming redeemed as a nation, as a people. In order to redeem our people, it's only through the self-reflection after isolation, after a downturn. And from a spiritual perspective, it's very clear that a much more serious condition is the person who goes through life in a mediocre manner without any self-reflection. Okay, so let me just share a couple of powerful teachings about this phrase, this powerful phrase at the beginning of our portion, Zostia Torah HaMetzorah. So the person who was the greatest, most famous for his dedication to the mitzvah of Shmirat HaLashon, of guarding the language, guarding one's speech, is the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim, who lived in Poland, in Radin, and he died in the first third of the 20th century. He's the one who wrote the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, and he's known by that Sefer, because Chafetz Chaim means one who desires life. And of course, he wrote many other works, but this is the one that he wrote that focuses, excuse me, on that. I should mention that we have in our yeshiva an entire shelf dedicated to the writings of the Chafetz Chaim, just an entire shelf just dedicated to his writing. So this is what the Chafetz Chaim says here, that he quotes the Gemara in Erchen 15b, and Metzorah, the name Metzorah stands for Motzi Shemra, one who puts forth bad talk, meaning to say that these afflictions come for the sin of Lashon Hara. And the purification of the Metzorah comes from the Kohen. It depends upon the Kohen. What is the Kohen? The Kohen is a symbol of purity and holiness of the mouth. That's what the Kohen is. The Kohen, this is why I said it's especially obnoxious when rabbis talk Lashon Hara, because rabbi is almost in a certain sense like the Kohen of the ancient world. The Kohen was the one who was the spiritual guide. So the rabbi is supposed to be a spiritual guide. And says the Chafetz Chaim that the rabbi has to be the symbol of purity and holiness of the mouth. As it says in 2 Kings in Malachi chapter 2, verse 7, Ki siftei kohen yishmeru das v'torah yivakshu mipiu, that the lips of the Kohen will guard the knowledge, and they will request Torah from his mouth, meaning to say that the purification of the Metzorah does not depend upon the doctor, but the speech of the Kohen. The Kohen's speech is what will eventually cause this Metzorah to become pure. As it states in the Mishnah in the Goyim, the Mishnah in the Goyim is what deals with Tzaras. It says, the Kohen is the one who says Tahor, or the Kohen is saying Tameh. And since the affliction comes for the sin of speech, therefore the Torah says that you heal the sinner through the words of speech, through the power of speech. Because it says, Ki hamavet v'achayim biyad Hashem. Death and life are in the hands of speech. So they were telling the story that one time the Chafetz Chaim was walking in the city of Radin, and it was at night, and the whole town was empty, and suddenly a stranger came through, and the stranger was on his wagon, and he says, and this is a classic story about the Chafetz Chaim, a very classic story. And the Chafetz Chaim, and he says, do you know where your rabbi, the tzaddik Chafetz Chaim, lives? So the Chafetz Chaim says, first of all, he's not a rabbi. Second of all, he's not a tzaddik. So the Jew said, what are you saying? Everybody knows that he's God-fearing and a tzaddik. So the Chafetz Chaim said, that which everybody says is wrong. The world doesn't really know him. I know him very well, and I promise you that what you're saying is a tremendous exaggeration. So this Jew got so upset, this stranger Jew, and he started cursing this person, and in the end, he actually smacked the Chafetz Chaim. So the Chafetz Chaim was so upset that he caused this Jew to sin, and so therefore, after a little bit of time, when the Chafetz Chaim returned to his house, he found that the Jew was sitting there and waiting for him. And when the Jew found out that he actually had struck the Chafetz Chaim and he had cursed him, he began to tremble and cry, and he almost fainted. And the Chafetz Chaim said, no, the Chafetz Chaim calmed him down. He said, no, you didn't do anything wrong. You were correct to smack me, because not only are you prohibited to speak Lashon Hara about others, but also about yourself. You're prohibited to speak Lashon Hara. So this is a famous story about the Chafetz Chaim. But I was always saying, like, what's so bad about saying Lashon Hara about yourself? Because, and this goes back to what we've been discussing the whole time. To my mind, Lashon Hara is so dangerous, and this is especially today. Not only, and this is why it's even prohibited for you yourself in the privacy of your own bedroom, your own office, to go to these sites which are just spewing bad things about other people, is because Lashon Hara is bringing negative energy into the world. Lashon Hara, this person who's the Metzorah, had the potential to be the Messiah. He had that potential initially, but instead he was spending his life on the worst thing in the world, which is putting down other people. And so therefore, because this is what he was doing, he has to be isolated from the society in order to improve. So it doesn't matter who you're saying it about. You're saying negative energy. If you're saying it even about yourself, it's negative energy, and it's dangerous, and it's damning. And so therefore, a person, this is I think the fundamental point of this story, that if you say negative energy, it can cause terrible, terrible things. And of course, I think, and I'm not saying this about myself, but I think that the most common example about this, I'm sorry to say, is in spiritual communities, like where people like to talk bad about, let's say, the rabbi or the people who are the servants of the communities, and to put them down. And that is something that's incredibly dangerous. People, there's nobody who's completely happy with their rabbi, or if there is, then that person will talk about it, and other people will put them down, and then people will talk. That brings in negativity into a spiritual community, and that just basically negates the whole purpose of what you're gathering for. So if you're ever in a synagogue where somebody is speaking bad or somebody gossiping, my suggestion is you're not going to be able to get them to stop talking, because that's almost impossible. It's like spinning in the wind. But my suggestion is that you just like walk away and just let the conversation continue without you. Because that I think that conversation where people are just talking bad about a person who's, let's say, a servant to the Jewish community, yes, that person is not perfect, and I'm sure they're not perfect because who is? But what you're doing by speaking, or what we're all doing, we're all guilty of this, by speaking bad about that person, is so much worse. You're contributing to the negative energy in the world, and just walk away. Anyway, I'll be happy to take questions at this point. If we have any questions.